It's Ashley, Keller Williams Real Estate in Everett. Stay tuned for 5 tips to make sure your closing goes super smooth. Hey, it's Ashley, Keller Williams Real Estate in Everett. I'm here with Tyler Beard, branch manager of Cross Country Mortgage, and we're here to bring to you another video. We're very excited. We're going to talk about what it means to be clear to close and kind of like that last week before you get your keys. And we want to just help you guys avoid possible pitfalls. So we've got 5 steps that we're going to go over, and I think this is going to be great. So
yeah, it's going to be awesome. And I think, everyone always gets this last part confused. I think there's a lot of emotions running, and sometimes there's hard feelings when there shouldn't be. And I think we're going to talk about some of those things on how to have a little bit smoother closing and maybe to kind of keep your emotions in check until you get keys in hand.
Oh yeah. Get the keys, because if you've gone this far and you're like at that last week, you don't want to mess anything up.
So Ashley, define for the audience, what is clear to close?
All right. Well, you're going to talk about what clear to close is.
I'm trying to talk about it from the real estate side.
From the perspective of mine.
Like, okay, so an example from our end. Yeah.
So on my side, when we have clear to close, it's like, it's very exciting. It means that it's like the lender has pretty much said, all right, we're going to give you this mortgage. We're just going to finalize these final steps. And it's a really exciting step, actually, because it means you've turned in all your documentation and we're ready to rock and roll. So from your perspective.
Yeah, so clear to close is the final step in the loan process where underwriting has signed off on your file. Now, most people think once they get the clear to close, they get the keys that day. Well, they don't yet. Clear to close is giving the final permission to the closing team to release the final loan documents. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is depending on your lender, there might be something called a prior to funding condition, which means this: there might be an outstanding and appraisal condition, or might be something really miscellaneous, really small, that necessarily the underwriter doesn't want to hold up to at least get the closing documents out, but they need that in order to fund. So like, let's say a client's selling another house, right? They may not have those funds until the day before, day of closing. The underwriter will say, hey, I will make this a prior to funding condition to have the final settlement statement from the sale of their home, which is common right now as people are buying contingently. So clear to close is a very exciting step. You can get excited, but just know we are not 100% in the clear yet. And you can't just get you're not going to be able to get your keys.
Exactly. So I do have to add on to those, like prior to close conditions, like it could be something like a CO detector. Something really small that just needs to photograph.
Really small, like it could be a compliance piece for Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or FHA or VA, something like on the appraisal that really is not going to hold up the loan, but it's just more of a compliance piece so the underwriter can deliver the loan to Fannie Mae or FHA, depending on whatever loan type they have.
Yeah. It's good. This is a really good step. Clear to close is like we're pretty much almost done, but we're not done. So,
and I think what we're about ready to talk about, people really have to keep the emotions in check. So once they think clear to close is, it's like, hey, we get it right off into the sunset. You can start getting ready to, but just be prepared because the next couple steps could be bumpy, and we're going to explain why.
Yeah, and we want to keep them nice and smooth. So after that, what ends up happening is you get your closing disclosure. Typically, they call it the CD.
Yeah,
so and break that down.
Yeah, and that closing disclosure is not necessarily final, and that might be sent out before clear to close. There's a lot of local lenders. We're not one, but a lot of local lenders that won't send out a closing disclosure until the underwriter has signed off on the file. Right. But what we usually do, we try to do that a week and a half or 2 weeks before closing. And the closing disclosure is going to get you some updated figures, but this is not the final closing disclosure. That's what we're going to talk about here once we talk about escrow and the closing team. But these are going to be updated. These should be probably within $500 of your original loan estimate, depending on if the lender was really upfront about all the correct fees. But this is usually probably within $500 of what you're really going to bring in for closing.
Yeah, which is great. And so they need to have that closing disclosure reviewed. So it will be emailed to them. Usually we're in the tech age now.
Yep.
It has to happen at least.
Sent to them electronically through probably a DocuSign type portal, and they're going to need to acknowledge it. Look, you can have 3 days to review and bring up any issues that you may have, but you need to acknowledge it on day one, which means just going in, signing it, and taking your time to review. This is not the final one anyways. So if there's an error, it still has plenty of time to get fixed with escrow.
Yes. And the key thing is that because we're down to like that final week and a half, it's very important that they acknowledge it right when they receive it, because if they miss it and they wait a day or whatever, it could potentially push closing out.
It could, because you can't sign your final loan docs until you've had 3 business days to review, which means this. So a lot of clients might get a closing disclosure on a Friday, might be closing, that Wednesday or that following Friday, right? Yeah. So they get it on a Friday, they acknowledge it Friday. So that's day 1. Saturday is day 2. Sunday doesn't get a count, but Monday does. So that's the 3rd day. So they can sign their final loan docs on a Tuesday with escrow if final loan docs went out, but they can't sign Monday. They have to have 3 full days, business days, and there is 0 wiggle room. You cannot get an exception to this. This is a hard stop. U.S. government decided to put in something called TRID, which is one of the guidelines for waiting periods, so that clients have enough time to review the final loan documents.
Yes.
Which is why we don't wait till typically we get our clear to close, because if it's a really fast closing, we want to get that out at initial approval, a clear to close, just because we just don't want to run into any tight deadlines with closing.
Indeed. Yes. And this is the thing, you can see how that can become very tight. Like if you miss it by 1 or 2 days, it may very well mean that you guys would not be closing on time. All right. Yep. The next step is we get.
Yeah, let's talk about closing with escrow.
Yeah, with
escrow and balancing our final figures.
Yeah.
Right. And so the balancing of those final figures, Ashley, in your experience, what does it mean to you when someone says, hey, the closing team is balancing with escrow? What does that kind of mean to you? And then I'll kind of lay it out in more detail.
Okay. So the basic idea from my perspective is that the lender is sending all of their fees and information that they have, so that escrow can basically put that into the final closing statement. And they just want to make sure that they have all of that correct. And so there's a conversation that's happening between escrow and the lender to make sure all that's good. And this would include everything, like the credits, the purchase price, the whole entire thing. So they're just making sure that that final statement is correct.
Yeah. And usually this step is done as little as the day before closing, all the way up to maybe a week before closing. They may get this final balance with escrow, and this is where they're going to balance those final figures. This is the step that everyone tends to get really upset about right now, not necessarily with us, but just with the process with escrow. And so I'm going to bring up probably the elephant in the room is this: the escrow companies have been overworked and they're understaffed. And I know this is a crisis in every business, but even more so in the mortgage world regarding title and escrow.
Yeah.
So we may send to them, the closing team may send to them the final, ask them to balance with the final figures, and they may not respond for a day or 2, or maybe 3, or maybe they are just not being responsive at all. Yeah. This has messed up closings because of this, because it hasn't given escrow enough time to find a notary now. Notaries are and short-staffed as well. So it causes a delay. And right now, a lot of clients are getting upset because escrow is not calling them. They're saying, hey, I thought, we were balancing on final figures. It was the closing team. What's going on? No one has called us. And it's like, well, escrow has gone dark. They aren't answering their phones. They're not responding back. So here's what I tell everybody. You already got your clear to close. You're going to get this house. Emotions are really high, but here's why people are really upset. They've organized moving trucks. They've organized family. They've organized days off. Here's what I tell everyone: plan on not necessarily moving on the day of closing. Always budget a day or 2 later or the following weekend. Yeah. And here's why: you will have your keys in hand by then, and you won't have to re-coordinate, lose deposits on moving crews. Just always budget maybe a week later. And if you do that, you will solve all of your problems, keep your expectations, be more realistic, because right now, as well as Ashley does her job as a real estate agent, and the Tyler Beard team, performs on a loan, this is the one piece that we can't control because there's a third party involved, which is title and escrow. Yeah. And I don't need to say names, but it's just more of this. They're all overworked. They're understaffed. and they are just trying to get through the day. And so because of that, people just need to, I think, set their moving timeline a little bit different than their closing day.
Well, it's the whole thing with COVID. I mean, you have to just be a little bit more patient with closing dates, because they don't always happen on the day you think they're going to happen. So I
Or
tell my, you do need to definitely schedule extra time here, because usually, here's the thing, the fact of the matter is usually you don't get keys anyway until like the night of the
night,
closing.
or
Like
even,
it's,
or even
yeah,
the
or
morning,
even
right?
it could even be the next day. Exactly. So you're not going to get keys like at noon or something like that. It's going to be way later in the day, way later in the day.
Yep, and that's because the counties are not recording a lot of times until
That's
end
right.
of day, or some of the counties say we have a 24-hour turnaround. So we fund, it's closed, title may insure, but they don't have recording numbers back till the
Right.
following day. You may not have keys till the following day.
Exactly.
I think this, a lot of clients are upset, and it's not just right now. It's been going on for about 12, 18 months while we've been going through COVID. People are having to work from home. It's a little bit more remote. The cities and the counties are just trying to do their best, but it's a really crazy busy time. So I think if people keep their expectation to realize, hey, we're always going to move a week later from our closing date, it will all be like easy peasy. So try not to give any notices that you're going to move out of your condo, your apartment
on the closing day. On the closing day,
for a week after closing, and then
give yourself some space. So basically, the bottom line though is that in order for escrow to contact the buyer specifically to sign, we need to have the balancing completed between the lender and escrow. So
yeah, and
this is why this is a critical step, right? Like you can't sign until
it's and look, when they're balancing the final figures, they're pulling all the receipts, they're pulling, hey, are we going to need a notary? Are we going to need two? They got to add up every little penny in for that final disclosure. So if you're off by 10 cents, your closing docs aren't more than likely going out until they figure out where that 10 cents is missing. And it sounds funny, but that's the reality. Because escrow can't fund, because they're not real numbers. We can't just send an above amount for that loan until we know what those final figures are.
Exactly. So critical step, and this is the step that needs to happen before escrow can reach out. So it's super duper important. So once escrow's reached out to you and you go and sign, then what? Be on your best behavior. Step 4, don't buy anything, people.
Please don't go buy anything. Do not go get a credit check. And here's why. There's a soft monitoring system in place to make sure that you're not going out buying a new Harley, a boat, or you just more realistically, you haven't gone out and bought furniture, you haven't bought flooring, you haven't bought maybe new appliances. And what's too often is like the day of funding, an alert comes up that you bought a couch, and we're at pause until the underwriter can go in and reapprove the file. We try to make, scramble, everyone's moving. It's really chaotic. So please, please, please do not switch your job. Do not get your credit pulled. Do not open up new lines of credit. Wait till you have your keys in hand. I know it's going to be a bummer that you have to wait a couple more weeks for that refrigerator, but I'm telling you, it will make your life so much easier and so much simpler.
Yes. Well, because here's the thing, like once you're at step 4, they don't buy anything step. I mean, like you're literally like a couple days or 1 or 2 days from getting your keys.
Yeah, you've already signed your documents.
Yes.
And maybe you've already wired your money, right? And you're just waiting. So just do that very thing. Just wait, be patient, and just know because of COVID, there's more monitoring systems in place, because they know that people are overspending and they know that people are doing new credit checks. And so once you get flagged on that soft credit monitoring system, you're going to be looked at very closely until we fund. And we have to resolve any issues that come up.
Yep. So be very, very careful. So from there, the lender's going to review all the signed documents. They're going to provide their approval. That pretty much green lights escrow for escrow to be like, okay, we can send stuff on. And basically, I kind of got a little bit ahead of myself, but once the lender has approved that, as long as all the funds are there with escrow can go ahead and they're released to record now, so they can send the information.
Yeah. So let's talk about that final day for a second. Kind of rewind. So you've been really patient. You waited. You haven't had your credit check. Okay, we're in the clear. Day of funding, right? Maybe you guys signed the day before closing. The notary is delivering those documents the next morning to escrow, and escrow will send those final signed documents for the seller and for the buyer over to us. We review them to make sure there's no signatures missing, or we're missing an addendum or something to the file. And that final closure will say, hey, you have the thumbs up. We are ordering the wire and we are funding this transaction. Once you receive those funds, you have permission to release and record. Now, if the buyer's funds haven't arrived, that closer or funder may decide to wire the money, but tell escrow, you do not have permission to fund this. I just want to make sure the money is sitting there for you when the buyer's funds arrive, so that way we don't miss closing for today.
Yes. And so this is an important piece for buyers to know. When you're wiring your funds over, you need to make sure you contact your bank to make sure that you set this wire up on time.
Yes. Some banks might be a 2-day lead time. So you might have to do it if you're funding on a Friday. You might have to go in on a Wednesday to do that.
Correct.
Or they might allow you Thursday or Friday. They just might need a little time. And you realize this, because of COVID, you may not be able to walk into your bank. You have to have an appointment.
Yes.
So you just need to have a little preparation, a little more time to do this.
Give yourself more time. Just know that not all banks are the same. Some of them can do it someday. I've had some where it's exactly like you said, Tyler, they need like 2 days to set it all up and all that. So just give yourself a little time. Yep. And then basically from there,
so
it's good.
So look,
we're all excited.
Yeah, so we funded it. We've given escrow the permission to release and record. You get the congratulations call from us. We're really excited for you, right? And then you guys have to wait for your keys. That could be at 4, that could be at 9.
Yep.
It could be the next day.
It could be the next day.
Yeah. It comes down to when do you get the recording numbers back?
Yep. So that's basically it. Yeah. So once all that's done, then you get your keys. Now it's amazing. There's a lot of stuff that happens in that 1 week, of course, but we want to make sure that everything goes really smooth.
Just realize this, everybody's human, and there's going to be a mistake, right? Because it's real estate and someone's going to drop the ball somewhere. Just keep your expectations realistic, and just make sure that you are setting your schedules for a week later from closing to be moving quite a bit. I know everyone's really excited, wants to do it the day of, but more likely that's not going to be realistic. I think in a lot of cases it can be, but because there are so many outside factors and so many other people involved just to get one real estate transaction done, that people have to be flexible. And if you're flexible, I promise you're going to have a really phenomenal, you're going to have a really great closing.
Yeah. So yay, awesome. Clear to close keys.
Well,
awesome.
Thanks, Ashley. This was an awesome video. I hope clients are really going to enjoy it. I think it's a good resource for them to listen for 15 minutes, and they're going to have a way better closing.
Yeah. And so if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Hey, you know what? They can call us at 425-931-7050, or they can email us at tylerbeardteam@tylerbeardteam.com.
Rock on. Well, thanks everybody. That's the end. Thanks, Tyler. We'll see you again soon.